Your day started with a meltdown, like it often does, and left you wondering why your child's reaction seems so much bigger than the situation. Maybe a small disappointment turned into a massive meltdown. A simple request becomes a battle, and you're left feeling confused, exhausted, and wondering why typical parenting advice just doesn't seem to work for your child. For parents raising kids with emotional dysregulation, maybe ADHD, DMDD, or just challenging behaviors, this experience is far more common than you might think. And when we begin to understand what's happening beneath those big reactions, everything starts to change. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be sharing some powerful insights from experts who shared at the last Calm Connection Summit, who truly understand emotionally intense and uniquely wired kids. And over the next couple of weeks, you're going to be hearing more about an exciting event coming soon for parents raising emotionally intense, strong-willed, neurodivergent kids. Now, we're only going to have one episode each week because these are a little bit longer, but there's a lot of good tidbits tucked in. Today, we're going to hear from Penny Williams, who shares insights about why some kids experience bigger emotions and baffling behaviors than others. Are you overwhelmed by constant meltdowns, defiance, or challenging behaviors? Are you longing for peace in your home? You're in the right spot. I'm Jamie, mom of 7, counselor, parent coach, and wrangler of big emotions. I've learned how to calm the chaos and build connection, even when things feel like they're falling apart. If you're looking to connect with your child, find effective parenting tools that honor your family values, and understand your child's unique wiring, you found it here. So pour that coffee, find a quiet spot if you have one of those in your house, and let's get started. Let's jump in to this conversation now. Hello, so glad you're here with us today. I'm Jamie Kirkbride from Calm Connection Parenting Podcast and a parent coach with Calm Connection Parent Coaching Program. I'm thrilled to have today's guest with us, Penny Williams, an award-winning author of 4 ADHD books, including Boy Without Instructions. Penny also hosts the Beautifully Complex podcast with over 5 million downloads. That's impressive. All right, Penny is here to help us better understand the root of why some kids have big emotions and big behaviors and what we can do about it. All right, thanks for being with us, Penny. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you are helping parents?
Yeah, I am doing this work as a parent coach for neurodiverse families that have neurodivergent kids because I am that parent. I have that kid. And when he was diagnosed first with ADHD in 2008, there was not much help out there. There wasn't anything to tell me what in the world I was going to do and how I was going to help this kid who was struggling in so many ways. And I really obsessed about it, and I taught myself a lot of things, and I kind of figured it out over a few years, and then realized that everybody didn't need to struggle and figure this out on their own. So I started blogging and writing books and doing the podcast, and I have parent training courses online as well, and I do my own summits as well. So lots of different ways to just try to help those parents and those kids, because it's so very important that we understand them and that they feel capable and confident in the world.
Right. Well, I am so glad you're doing what you're doing. I know I have enjoyed listening to your books, reading your books, and so I thank you for the work that you're doing. Let's just get right into it. Can you tell us, why do some kids seem to have big emotions and those intense behaviors while others don't?
Yeah, I think it's the nervous system. When we think about the autonomic nervous system, which really learning about the brain and the nervous system was what changed everything for me and my own parenting and for my own kid. But really understanding that our nervous system's job is to protect us, to keep us safe. And sometimes it gets false alarms. Some of us have super sensitive nervous systems.
Mhm.
So we're going to get triggered by things, and that might happen more easily, right? But then compounding on top of that, when the behaviors and the emotions get bigger and bigger, it's because of lagging skills and lagging
Mhm.
self regulation. And so we can work on those skills, we can teach those skills and help kids to be able to manage how they're feeling and what they can do about it. And even to know that they do have some control and they can do something
Right.
about it.
Right.
But when we are just seeing that reactivity, then it sort of runs away with the
Yeah.
ship, right? It just takes over. And our kids don't have the ability in those moments to really have control over what they're doing, what they're saying, because their nervous system has taken over their body and said, we're either going to fight, we're going to flee, or we're going to freeze and hope that
Right.
it keeps us safe, right? And so understanding that it's safety at the core of that then helps us as the parent or the adult in the room to stay more calm and settled so that we can be that regulated presence. Because when we're not, our kids
Right.
are never going to calm down, right? The emotions are going to get bigger, the behaviors are going to get bigger, the bigger that our energy gets along with it. So,
Right.
there's two factors there. There's how we show up,
Mhm.
and then there's what's going on for our kids too.
Exactly. So there's actually a lot at play when it comes to kids'
Mm,
emotions and behaviors, a lot behind the
yeah.
scenes, right? Very
Yeah.
good. Well, that's a great explanation of that. Can you help me understand what's happening in their brain when a child has a meltdown?
Yeah, so basically their brain is hijacked is how I like to talk about it. And I
Great way to
learned
describe it.
this, yeah, because we need to really be able to accept that they are not in control in those moments. If they are truly in a meltdown, we're not talking about a tantrum, we're talking about a meltdown, they do not have control anymore. Their brain has been hijacked and it has to cycle through and recover. It has to get back to regulated. And when our kids get dysregulated to a point where they get to meltdown, their thinking brain is no longer accessible.
Right.
And that is huge to understand. I call myself the great rationalizer. I'm type A. I like to use logic and rational thought and get through things, right? And
Just
so I was
explain your way out of it, right?
explain our way out of it. Never once worked for my kid, not once. And I couldn't understand it until I really understood this nervous system and brain connection, what's happening in parts of the brain when our thinking brain is cut off. We can't process language. So the more I talk to my kid, the more overwhelmed he gets.
Right.
It's co-escalating instead of
Right.
co-regulating, right? And
That
so
is such a good point. I remember seeing that even in my own child. And like you, I think I can explain a lot of things that would just help it make sense.
mhm.
But the more words I would use, the more my words and the auditory input was almost a trigger for him.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're
Yeah.
just overwhelming the system, and the survival brain and the emotional brain, which have taken over in those moments, they can't process that language. They can't
Right.
rationalize, right? They can't
Yeah.
order things and make sense of things and manage things. All of that comes from the thinking brain. And so it becomes sort of primal. That instinctual response of our nervous system is primal. We've had this forever,
Yeah.
right? And I equate those different parts of the nervous system states to different animals to help make sense of it for kids.
Oh,
When
that's
we're
that's neat.
regulated, yeah, like when we're regulated, it's the owl. Our
Okay.
thinking brain is working. We're pretty calm.
Yeah.
If we're in fight or flight, we're either the cheetah that's ready to run away, or we're the porcupine whose prickles are going to go up and we're going to, try to
Right.
fight and protect ourselves, or the possum. If we're in freeze, we're going to play dead, we're going to shut down and hope that the danger passes, right? And really helping kids to understand it too is part of helping them not have such big emotions and big behaviors all the time. They
Right.
need to know what's going on in their body. They need to know how they can work with it, manage it, sit
Yes.
with it, right?
That is
To,
such a great point. Such a great point. Very good. You know, you mentioned a distinction between tantrum and meltdown. And some of our
Mhm.
listeners may kind of be wondering, well, what's that difference? Can you give us just a brief description of how you see those two differently?
Yeah, absolutely. A tantrum is within the child's control. A meltdown is not. So a tantrum might be, I was in the grocery store line, I saw that candy bar, I really want it. Mom says no, and I'm going to make a big scene here and see if I can get her to change her mind, right? That's a
Right.
tantrum. When you then address that want, say you decide to give your kid the candy bar because you just need to get out of the store with your sanity intact, right? So you give them the candy bar, it immediately stops. The tantrum, the behavior, just like a switch, stops.
Right.
That was in their control.
Okay.
In a meltdown, if you tried to give that candy bar at that point, it's not going to change anything because they are not in control. And a meltdown can start as a tantrum and get out of control, right? But a meltdown is not in their control anymore. That's the big distinction. And I think it's really, really crucial that we understand that.
I think that's really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the way you deal with them will be very, very different.
Exactly.
Based on that.
Exactly.
Very good. Well, then that leads me to this question. What are some common parenting pitfalls that maybe we fall into when we're trying to calm down a child who's having a meltdown?
We want to judge the behavior, which is natural, right? It's totally human. And we judge behavior because, again, we're trying to determine if we are safe or in danger. That's where judgment comes from. And that natural instinct to judge just isn't helpful because often it takes us into a narrative that isn't true. So if I'm judging my kid and saying, oh, he's being so disrespectful to me right now, the way that he's talking to me, I'm not acknowledging that he's having a hard time. I'm not acknowledging that the behavior's out of his control. I'm not acknowledging that he has neurological differences, right? I'm just judging. And then our instinct is to punish, to be punitive at that point. So it sends us down that path that is wholly unhelpful. And typically, especially if it's a meltdown, it's only going to escalate the situation. It's not going to help at all. If we think about the fact that this is something that is different about their nervous system or their brain, or they've been triggered and they're having a hard time managing the emotion, managing the frustration, whatever it might be, then we are able to, one, stay more calm ourselves, and two, really be looking at it through that brain-based lens of what is going on for my kid? What is that underlying why behind this behavior or this big emotion? And when I can address the why, I can actually make change. But if I don't address why something's happening, it's going to keep happening, right?
Right.
You know, logically it makes sense, but we're taught to be authoritarian as parents. You know, we're taught that, you know, if somebody back talks to you, it's disrespect. We have all this messaging already. It's really hard to counter that. You have to be very intentional, mindful as a parent to take on this whole other sort of thought process and perspective, but you get to control the narrative. You get to control the story around what's going on for your kid, what's going on for you. And I think recognizing that power is really helpful to being able to actually to step into it and to use it and to be okay with stepping away from that traditional mindset of parenting that just, in my opinion, it's not good for any kid, but it's definitely not working for neurodivergent kids.
You know, that is so true, Penny. And I'm so glad to hear you say that because I think a lot of us grew up in homes where that was the parenting and it was really a mindset. And I think, you know, thankfully we're coming around on that and parents are learning different ways to do it. But I think it really can be harmful, like you said, when we just approach a situation right away with, you know, addressing the child as though they're disrespectful or defiant or, you know, and I know that's even happened with our child at school, you know, whether it's other teachers or other adults. If you quickly assign a child a behavior that doesn't fit with their unique wiring, you're going to handle them totally different. And when you handle them differently, it may be an additional trigger, which is the last thing that an emotionally intense situation really needs. Exactly. So I really like the way that you
the way you differentiate that. I think it really is a powerful change in our parenting when we take that step back and really, I guess what I heard you saying is being curious, asking ourselves, why is this happening, rather than
100%.
than assigning that. That's neat. I really like.
Before we continue with the rest of this conversation, I want to take just a quick moment to tell you about something that's helping parents all over the world create calmer homes and stronger connections with their emotionally intense kids. Let me share this. You know you need to learn effective ways to handle your child's big emotions and challenging behaviors. But it feels like it's going to take so much time, money, and energy that you just don't have. Thankfully, that's not the case. The Calm Connection Parent Coaching Program will show you how to understand your child's wiring, calm the intense emotions, and manage those challenging behaviors with simple tools that actually work. Think of it as your shortcut. No more endless hours of research, expensive appointments, or sleepless nights worrying if things will ever get better. This is just what you've been waiting for, and quite possibly the answer to your prayers. Let's arm you with the best tools to help you parent your child to be all they were created to be. Join me at calmconnectionparent.com. And let's get you back to the peaceful, loving, joy-filled family life you imagined. It's easier than you think, and you don't have to do it alone. That's right. Let's get back to our conversation with Penny Williams.
Like that. Well, that leads me to this question then. How can we as parents create an environment that supports their nervous system regulation and a child who does have unique wiring?
Thinking about regulation, honestly, is so key. And I wish I had known this when my kids were young, but I just didn't. I just didn't have the information, right? But had I, we would have been working on regulation. We would have incorporated it into our day-to-day routines and the fabric of our lives. And this is what I teach parents when I coach them, is when we are asking a kid to do something that might be a little difficult for them. So say if we have a kid with ADHD who's hyperactive and we want them to sit down and do homework, or sit down and have family dinner at the dinner table and be still, which is a big ask for some kids.
That is.
What can we do to set them up to have the opportunity for success? Part of that is having the appropriate expectations, right? When my kid was 6 or 7, there's no way he would have sat at the dinner table the whole time, still and quiet. And I knew not to expect that, right? But outside of that, right, what else can we do? We can prep the nervous system. We can prep the brain to show up with the best opportunity for success. We can do a regulation activity before we sit down to dinner, before we do homework.
I like the sound of that. Explain what a regulation activity might look like or be like.
Yeah, there's a million different possibilities, and some work for some and not for others, and vice versa. You have to know your kid. You have to get to know them, and their sensory profile is important here too. So for my kid, for example, he was mostly a sensory seeker. He was crashing into things. He liked heavy work, crunchy foods, that sort of stuff. Leaning into that is regulating. So a weighted blanket, for instance, would be regulating. Having a super crunchy snack before we did homework would be regulating. If you have a more soft, gentle sort of kid, maybe a sensory avoider, and maybe not, but just prefers things more quiet and still, then you can do those kinds of activities. They can blow bubbles. They can drink thick liquid through a straw is a good one. Anything quiet, like maybe a soft blanket, soothes their system, right? So part of it is getting to know your kid and understanding what they need to regulate, like what sensory input or lack of input is going to really help. There are a number of things that are scientifically proven to activate the vagus nerve, which is that central nerve in our autonomic nervous system. It controls fight, flight, freeze, and regulation. So when we activate it, which sounds like the opposite of what we want to do, but when we activate it, it's actually soothing. And like blowing bubbles, blowing out candles, blowing up a balloon, anything where you're blowing pretty hard, activates that nerve. Cold water on the face, or a lot of kids I work with, they don't like cold water on their face. So we do an ice pack on their cheeks or on their neck. Anything that vibrates the throat activates the vagus nerve. So humming, singing, gargling, whistling. So anything that pulls sort of these muscles too. So that's why whistling works. And then, of course, deep breathing exercises, right? Where we're breathing in really deep and holding it and then breathing it out really in a big exhale. All of those things are proven to regulate the nervous system in anyone if your kid is open to them. And I always have to give this caveat because yes, blowing bubbles will regulate their nervous system, but if they don't want to blow bubbles and you're trying to get them to blow bubbles,
it may not regulate their nervous system.
Nobody's getting regulated. Everybody's getting dysregulated, right? So it has to be something that your kid is willing to do first and foremost. We don't push them in any particular area. But there are so many things: counting backwards, counting forwards, taking a walk. Movement is great for regulation. And it doesn't have to be a long time. You could do 2 minutes of breathing before doing homework, and it's going to help your kid's body. Now, is it going to magically make them want to sit down and do homework and be still the whole time? No.
Right.
But we're just getting as prepped as we can for success by doing that, by really leaning into what we know about how much our nervous system controls both our behaviors and our emotions.
Well, man, you have so many good things to share. And I love that you mentioned the sensory processing, because honestly, even as a mother of 7, that was something I had never heard about. I didn't even, I mean, I knew it existed because of junior high science, but we talked about 5 systems and they seemed just ordinary until we had a child where his sensory system wasn't working the way it was supposed to. And it took an occupational therapist really explaining to me some of the deficits or differences that he had for us to really change the way we parented him. So I really like that you mentioned it's important to understand your child's sensory profile. If there are parents that are listening that are totally new to sensory things, how big of the puzzle of meltdowns or big behaviors or emotions is sensory to understand?
I think it depends on the kid. If they're really sensitive sensory wise, or if they have really big sensory needs, like being a sensory seeker, it really has a lot to do with those behaviors and those emotions. If they're not as sensitive in that area, if they don't have bigger sensory needs, then it doesn't play as big of a role. But if you think about just life in general for all of us, we are constantly taking in sensory input and processing it. It is part of being in the world and moving through the world. And so it is part of that equation, but it isn't always a really big part. But for most of our neurodivergent kids, it's a pretty big part because typically there's some different processing or different needs going on there. Or they just don't have the skills yet to manage when something sensory makes them uncomfortable. So if there's a really loud sound and it hurts and I don't know what to do or how to help myself, then I might try to run away from it. Right. And that is where, we see really big behaviors from sensory sometimes. And it can be really troubling for them. It's really uncomfortable to be in their body in those moments, which is why they're doing anything and everything to try to make it stop or to get away from it. Right. And so it can be a huge piece of the story. It just depends on the child
individually. Honestly, for our child, it was one of the biggest pieces. And we found mealtime was one of the most challenging times. And when you think about it, it's one of the only activities that accesses almost every single system of sensory input. And so it was really vital for us to figure that out, because he was so sensitive, whether it was the smell of a sibling sitting next to him or the sound of a sibling chewing, if the food looked different than it had a day prior, if he didn't know what we had done to fix the food, is it going to taste different? Is it hotter than normal? Or, all of those things would really set him off, making mealtime very difficult. And I'm embarrassed to admit now that I just thought that he was being so defiant at mealtimes. And I would dread mealtimes because of what I thought was his defiance. Yeah. And only through learning about some of those sensory things did we, have to become more curious as to what is the real issue. And a lot of times you find out it is something behind the behavior, not the behavior. Mm-hmm. And so that was so important for us to just approach that with that curiosity. So I appreciate you mentioning that. That's neat.
I always tell parents to ask, or teachers, whoever in a kid's life, ask yourself, if it's not blank, what I think it is, disrespect, opposition, whatever, what else could it be? And even if you're certain you know what it is, ask yourself this question, because it's going to open the door for that brain-based lens and for that curiosity of really figuring it out. Right. Because kids do well if they can. Right. They don't sit down and choose to make our life hard. Right. And typically, they're just as upset about a meltdown or all of these intense situations as we are, if not more. Mm-hmm. They don't like it any more than we do. So it's not a choice. And that really helps just, again, to get your perspective on what is really going on here. It feels like it's disrespect and opposition. But is it really? Because most of the time, the answer is no, it's not really that. Yeah. It's this other thing that is causing that because they can't manage the other thing, right? They can't deal with it. But asking that question is so, so key.
Yes, I agree. I think I was surprised how often it wasn't defiance and that I had been off course. And, even with disrespect or it was really insightful when somebody first shared that with me. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Well, you've shared so many good things with us today. I'm wondering, is there one thing that our listeners can walk away with from what you've shared and maybe give it a try this week to see a parenting win?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many.
I know there's so many good nuggets here.
Because, my kids are young adults now. So I've had years of accumulating these little nuggets, right? Learning as I was going and not getting it right a lot of the time. And that's how we learn. But I think that one big thing just to bring the temperature down in your families and in your homes is to ask yourself that question when something comes up that feels difficult. If it's not opposition, what else could it be? And really sitting with it. Take a breath when your kid is having a big emotion or big behavior. I learned this from a therapist in the Midwest that I had on a summit years ago. And he said, as soon as, the crap hits the fan, just put your hands on your chest and take a deep, empathetic breath.
Yeah, that's good.
Before you say anything, do anything, respond in any way you do that, it gives you the chance to pause and be intentional instead of reactive. It gives your nervous system a chance to get settled, right? Yeah. That breathing is helping regulate. It's offering co-regulation and calm for your kid to borrow. We're wired to mirror what other people are doing. So your kid might even take that same big breath with you. And it just, sets the stage.
That's right. That's what they call co-regulation, right? And exactly. I think you had referred to that earlier and just how important that really is. And sometimes that feels like a challenge, doesn't it? Because you might not be feeling what it is that you're supposed to be showing.
Yeah. And you're human. We are all wired to respond in kind to protect ourselves. So if you are yelling at me, my brain is telling me and my body is going to just go right at it unless I stop it to yell back at you, because that would be protective. But it doesn't help when we're trying to raise kids, right? When we're trying to help a kid who's having a hard time, that reactivity isn't necessary, and it's actually does more harm than good. So being able to show up, we use the word calm, and I hate using it now because it's more than calm. Like, it's not just like sitting still and peaceful and quiet, right? It's your
There's
body
something active
feeling
about
good.
it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be so passive.
Right.
It can have energy to it. Really, what we're trying to do is put out the energy for our kid to
I like
absorb that
that.
we want from them, because we
Yeah.
do absorb each other's energy, tone, mood, whatever you want to call it. And we have to show up in the way that we want them to show up. You know, it always makes me laugh to think about your kids yelling at you, and so you yell back,
Right.
but you're doing the thing that you're upset with
Don't
them
want
for
them to do.
doing, right? But it's the way we're wired, so I get
Right.
it, but it makes no sense. It's so helpful to really sit back and go, wow, that really doesn't make any sense. Why would I model for my kid what I'm upset at them for doing, what I don't want them to do? Of course I don't want to, right? So try to bring the energy that you want from them into the room. They can absorb some of it. They can mirror some of it. And it makes all the difference. Like,
I really like how you said that, you know, that it's not passive, because I think so many parents hear some of the philosophies that we know are more healthy for our kids, and it feels too passive. But it's not passive. It's just taking that time, taking that moment to just gather what you really want to bring. And like you said, bringing that powerful energy of calm that isn't passive, but is actually very powerful. Yeah, I really like that.
Just broadening how we think about the word calm.
Yeah.
You know, that it's not just still and quiet.
Right.
It can be a lot of other things. What it really means is that we feel good in our body. We feel settled. We feel confident, capable, regulated,
intentional.
Right? That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Oh, I really like that. I've never heard somebody put it quite like that. And I think that in itself is very powerful. Very good. Well, you've shared so many good things with us. I feel like we could talk forever about.
What a great chat that was with Penny. I hope you enjoyed it too. It honestly was one of my favorite interviews ever. And I don't know about you, but even just hearing her voice just feels so calming. And if you were part of the summit, you know that she gave away some pretty special gifts. Each of the speakers at our summit had given away gifts, and maybe you were able to hear her and enjoy that gift that she shared. Let's see. You can check out Penny Williams' podcast as well, and I think you'll enjoy hearing that. It's mentioned at the start when I introduced her, and I know you will love it as well. There's one thing I hope you're taking away from what you just heard today. It's this. When we begin to understand what's happening beneath our child's behavior, everything starts to change. The meltdowns, the big behaviors, the reactions that once felt confusing or overwhelming begin to make sense. And that understanding gives us a completely different way to respond. And that's really what calm connection parenting is all about. It's not passive. It's not just managing behavior, but learning how to connect with what's happening underneath it so we can guide our kids toward calmer, healthier ways of expressing those big feelings of being heard. Over the next few weeks here on the podcast, I'm going to be sharing a few more powerful insights and conversations like this one from experts featured at last year's Calm Connection Parenting Summit, who really do truly understand emotionally intense and uniquely wired kids. In fact, many of them had uniquely wired kids themselves. And I'm especially excited because something really special is coming soon that I can't wait to tell you more about. So be sure to tune in the next couple weeks as I start sharing more about it very soon. And make sure you're part of the Calm Connection Parenting Facebook group, because that's where I'll be sharing some of the details first, along with a few fun surprises that you won't want to miss. And of course, stay tuning in here, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep showing up for your uniquely wired child with curiosity and connection. Because every step you take toward understanding them better helps build the calm, confident connection your family is looking for. I hope today's episode gave you a breath of fresh air, maybe a bit of hope too. If this encouraged you, would you please take a moment to follow and leave a quick review? It helps this much needed message of calm and connection reach more families. And if you're looking for additional resources, be sure to visit calmconnectionparenting.org and check out the podcast tab. There you'll find a variety of free resources waiting just for you. Until next week's episode, take a deep breath, grab that fresh cup of coffee, and remember, you've got this. And on the days you don't, well, we're in it together.